Many of us music producers don't have access to a drum kit or a room to record them. But nowadays we are fortunate enough to have access to a lot of great digital options. Hello there, I'm Thomas from She Died in a Parking Lot. Today I'm excited to walk you through my approach to mixing drums and percussions using Addictive Drums 2 by XLN Audio. It's a fantastic drum plugin. I'll also be sharing the unique routing I used for my cover of Chase. Let's dive right in. Let's begin with the drums, which are all the tracks right there. It's a Midi drum. I'm using Addictive Drums 2, which I used for quite a while now and I really enjoy. There's a plethora of good drums plugins these days. Do you have a favorite one? Which one do you use? Let me know in the comments, please. I'm really curious about it. So I started on the Black Velvet library with the Mullet BITF preset that I tweaked. I want to explain first what I did with the routing of the plugin. It's used in multi-output. So right there, multi-output is selected. Here I choose to put the kick and the snare out and to the master of the plugin. That way, right there, you can see I have a kick and snare sidechain tracks, which goes to their separate buses at the end of the session right there. They have no output, so I use them only for sidechain compression, for like the bass and other stuff like that. And I also wanted to get the tom outs, so they have their own tracks in Logic and doesn't go to the master of the plugin. That way I really have a lot more flexibility and I could give them way more punch than I could with in the plugin. So everything goes to the master right there, except the toms. Let me show you what I did on the toms. Okay, let's hear the toms right there. Let me show you how I processed the toms. So there are the 4 tracks for the drums right there, which goes to their own bus. I EQ them all kind of the same way. So I put a boost to emphasize the root frequencies and the cut after that to get rid of some mud or unwanted frequency. It's basically the same kind of EQ but applied to a different frequency. Right there. There is also a bit of transient shaping just to get rid of the low boom that would muddy the mix. So on the 2 floor tones. I use Crack, which is a really simple transient designer. Then on their bus, there is also a bit more of transient shaping, just to get a bit more attack and less sustain. A bit more saturation from GST Eat. Then there is an EQ to boost the low end a bit more and the high end as well, cutting frequencies that were unnecessary right there. And finally, there's a gain plugin that I use for automations right there. Now let's speak a bit more about processing and routing the drums here. As you can see, I have my drum master track with the plugin and the tom bus. They both go to the same bus right there, which is just the drum bus, which is really not that much processed. On that bus, I have low control to keep the low frequencies under control and boost a bit of 60 Hz. Let's hear that. And then I have GST maximizer that I use for a bit of saturation and some clipping. Then I have a second bus right there, which the drum and the tom bus also goes to. It's my parallel drum compressor. I have VCA compressor, which does a nice job, a nice bit of saturation as well. Let's hear it. And also a bit of EQ just to get rid of those low mids bass frequencies right there. Let's hear those two basses together. Really more punchy right there. And the final bus I have is a saturation bus. So I have GST heat on it. And if we listen the three together. Then those three buses go to the master drum bus. In there you'll find some Pro Q3. Here those are dynamic EQs. They are sidechain to the snare because I wanted to put more emphasis on the low end of the snare and just cut a bit of high end on the hit because it was a bit too much on my taste and it was a bit too much on the mix. Then I have channel EQ, just to do a bit more of drum shaping. GST maximizer again, to clip everything a bit, put a bit of exciting in the high end, and to control the mono bass here at 60 Hz. Then low control again, just to prevent some more low end buildup. And give the kick a bit more weight right there. Then I put fresh air to get a bit more sparkling frequencies from the drums. That really helped them cut through the mix. Then I have another GST heat, but it's only used for the metal breakdown right there. You can see the mix is really low at 10% because that's a really lot of saturation right there. If I put the mix at 100%. But well, at 10% it really just adds a bit more of intensity and saturation for the metal breakdown, so that's really great. And finally, on my drum bus you'll find a gain plugin which I used only for volume automation during the mix. Let's also check the percussions I added in the song. So it's all the tracks right there. It's pretty simple. They all go to a bus, but there's no plugin on it, so it's more like a folder for organization. Let's check the shaker right there. There is a compressor just to keep the dynamic even. Then there is an EQ just to get rid of the low frequencies that I didn't need in the mix. And just a bit of saturation to give it a bit more life to it. And also it's a bit pan to the right. Then there is a loop which is called Turkish Calm Rick. So there's a limiter to keep the dynamic under control. Then a bit more of saturation. Which also does a bit more of compression. So here it's a bit more for tone and color shaping. Then you have an imager to spread the stereo a bit. So it takes a bit more place on the mix, and an EQ for mix purposes. Then for the Latin Day gyro percussion, it's almost the same thing. So there's a limiter for the dynamic. Bit more saturation for color shaping. Also with the compression setting. And some EQ for mix purpose as well. Studio percussions right there. Let's start at the bottom right there with the gain plugin, which is really used to give it more volume. I think those effects are here from the preset I started with. So EQ. Compression. Which doesn't do that much except for the distortion setting, and a bit more for distortion. Then there is this loop I used from Alchemy, the Am I Funky preset, which is quite nice, and I used to emphasize the drums and add a bit more groove during the metal break. Let's start with some saturation. This one does not do a lot, but even at 0, it does a bit of distortion. Then EQ for mixing, get rid of the frequencies I didn't need with the drum. Compressor to keep the dynamic even. Just adds a bit of saturation as well. And then the gain here is just here to put everything in mono, because there's a bit of reverb on the side I didn't need. During the first break, there is also a clave that imitates a metronome. It's just a drum synth. That's pretty much it. And there is the reversed clap with reverb. So I really just started with a clap. Put some delay, EQ and reverb on it. Bounced it and then reversed it. Really simple. So the result is that. There's a bit of EQ to get rid of the mid-range. And another EQ that I used for automation, it's right there. It's really like using a filter on a synth, and then I just automated it by hand. That's pretty much it. Instrument plugins are incredible these days, and in the next video I'll be showing you how to mix your bass guitar and synth using Modo Bass 2 by Alchemy Multimedia. If you found today's tips on mixing drums with Addictive Drums 2 useful, please subscribe and leave a comment below. I love to read what you have to say and answer your questions. Thank you for joining me, I'll see you soon.